3:32 here on AM 950 KPRC. The Supreme Court ruling on a couple of issues came down today. We'll get to gerrymandering in a second. But the first one, the bigger question, I think, was whether or not we could ask the question on the 2020 U.S. Census if you are a citizen or not a citizen. With the Supreme Court leaning the direction it seems to lean most of the time, this kind of seemed like a slam dunk to me. This one I have to admit I'm a little shocked over. Now, the issue technically, it's not dead yet. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, writing for the majority, said the explanation offered by the Trump administration for adding the question, asking a person whether it is a citizen, the explanation was inadequate. So it got kicked back down to a lower court. He did leave open the possibility it could provide an adequate answer. Joining us to talk about it, constitutional law expert Byron Henry. So that makes me wonder what the explanation was in this suit to begin with as to why they wanted to add that census question.
Well, the hastily concocted or developed reasoning for the adding of the question had to do with enforcement of the Civil Rights Act and getting accurate numbers in different states and whatnot for citizens versus non-citizens and whatnot. And there just, while that could possibly be a reason, there just wasn't enough study and backup of an administrative agency like the Department of Commerce that you would expect to make that a legitimate, substantially reasoned, prima facie reason for adding a question. The decision is actually, on its face, a real administrative law issue. It has very little to do with the undercounting of Hispanics or discrimination or anything like that. It's basically a law nerd's administrative law question about whether or not an executive agency, how good a reason and how much reasoning does an agency have to provide before a court will simply just accept it. And what John Roberts said today, the chief said today in his opinion is, not much, but this isn't enough. So. Okay.
Here's the part that confuses the hell out of me. Help me out here if you would. I thought the whole idea behind counting people and counting specifically citizens was for the purpose of representation. And the representation is based on population, but not population that just lives here, population that are citizens of any particular state, any particular district. How can you determine how the proportion is supposed to be if you can't count citizens?
Well, that's a good question, though. We have not included citizens on the every decade census, the decennial census, since to 1950. So they've been coming up with numbers in the Commerce Department and in the executive branch for years, somehow, without counting citizens. But I agree with you. And
they've been guessing. They've been guessing.
Exactly. And they're probably counting a lot of people that aren't citizens. Let's be honest. The populations of some of the states do include non-citizens in the population estimates, and that's just the fact of the way the country has been basically handling immigration for the last 30 years. But I will say that the opinion does not question the legitimacy of asking a citizenship question on the census. It's a procedural issue.
Yeah, I wonder if they had included that as part of an explanation from the get-go, if they might have gotten a different result. Maybe this was just poor lawyering on behalf of the United States.
I believe that this, in my view, this falls in the same rubric of when President Trump enacted the first travel ban. And it was done hastily and without thinking through all the consequences. And it was, people were in the airports halfway in between their countries. And what do you do with them? Can you send them back? They're stuck at airports and can't leave. It just wasn't handled as thoroughly and thought through before it was implemented, mainly because it was the idea, to do it came late, and you have to have those census forms printed according to the government. There's been some different dates. It could be the end of this month, could be the end of October, but in any event, there is a pressing deadline to get this done. And so it was hasty. A beneficial explanation is that it was hasty and not properly vetted through the normal agency channels, which left a very thin record. And in fact, opponents would say what the record does show are some nefarious reasons for including the question, such as to intentionally keep people from answering the census that may have the right to answer the census, may be citizens, but they may not want to answer questions for various reasons, and that it would undercount Hispanics and other minority groups, which was the contention. The court didn't bite on that, so that's not an issue. What the court did say is you can have a census with a citizenship question, but you've at least got to follow the basic skeletal rules to enact these types of policies and change the census. And in this case, you didn't do it, but we're going to give you another chance. So go back and dot your I's and cross your T's, and we'll see you again.
All
so
right.
whether or not the government follows up is up to the government.
Right.
Whether they do it quickly or whether or not they just let this drop, that's an internal executive branch decision.
It sounds like what the president was trying to do earlier today is to buy some time. Does he have any legal ground to stand on to delay doing the 2020 census?
Well, I've answered this a couple times before. Legal authority and practical authority are two different things. I don't know if there's any law which gives the president or the executive branch the right to delay a census. I can tell you that the executive branch, specifically the Commerce Department, is in charge of carrying out the census. So if they delay, the census gets delayed. So in practical terms, if it takes them longer to do it, so what President Trump may say is, we are going to go back, we're going to get this litigated, and once it's done being litigated, we will print out the census forms and perform the census. So he may just be saying, well, it's not me delaying it, it's the court.
Right.
Once the court blesses or strikes down this question, which the Supreme Court didn't do either today, it sent it back. Once we get an answer on the census question, final answer from the Supreme Court, we will print the census forms and do the census, which is not unreasonable. You know, until you get what can be on the forms, you can't really print them. So that may be the delay, so to speak, that happens as just a result of this litigation and the fact that the executive branch is in charge of doing it.
There are a lot of liberal judges. We happen to have one now in Harris County that got swept in with straight ballot voting in this past election, mainly because there's some people turning out to vote for Beto O'Rourke. And, she sent out a missive today, I think breathing a sigh of relief that the Supreme Court ruled the way it did, because Harris County has not just a high Hispanic population, it also has a high level of Hispanics who are not citizens and are not necessarily here legally, and they want, obviously, as many heads counted as they can, because they want as much aid and money as they can get based on population.
And let's be honest, if we're talking inaccurate counts, Texas stands to lose as much or more than any other state if other states are going to count that way. So Texas actually has an interest in counting. If you're going to err in your counting, Texas has a vested monetary interest and representational interest in overcounting, not undercounting. So, the state of Texas, obviously we want to be as accurate as possible, but Texas stands to lose money and representation if they're counting people they shouldn't be as of now, and that number gets corrected. But you hit the nail on the head. How can you apportion government, House of Representatives, money, all the things that are based on population and citizenship if you don't know who lives here? And there's this assumption also that everybody that's not a citizen is somehow illegal or could be deported. That's not the fact. We have people living here on visas. We have tons of people in this country that are not citizens but are also here legally. So the idea that the citizenship question is a binary, all you're trying to do is trying to get people so you can deport them and throw them in jail or undercount them, is completely misapprehends the entire census issue and the different classes or levels of immigrants and people that reside in this country that happen to also not be voting citizens.
We're talking to Byron Henry, constitutional law expert, here on AM 950 KPRC. How about the gerrymandering case? I have to admit I didn't pay as much attention to that. That got sent back down to lower court, didn't it?
Yes, no, to be dismissed. I mean, the gerrymandering case was a 5-4, only two opinions. Basically, that federal courts, the Constitution leaves drawing, redistricting, and districting to the political branches. The Constitution provides no basis for the federal courts to get involved when it comes to partisan, based on party affiliation, gerrymandering.
In other words, this is not our job, is what they said. This is not our job to decide this.
That's correct. I think Chief Justice Roberts said it, that sometimes it is the province of the judiciary to say what the law is, and sometimes It's for us to say what the law is not. And the law is not, it is not a federal constitutional issue on when legislatures get together and draw lines and include partisan reasons for doing so. That's beyond the province of judges.
I assume this is a victory for the states then, who get to decide for themselves what their political lines are going to be.
It's really hard to tell. It's a victory for the idea that the federal courts are not the end-all, be-all, stop for all ills that face the entire country, state, local, federal, and everything. It's a judicial modesty opinion, which we don't get very often from the Supreme Court. Usually they're more than happy to grab more power or get more power in their sphere. But, it's going to help some states that have Republican legislatures, and they're going to draw it to help Republicans. Some states, it's going to help Democrats. I mean, the bottom line is that, as the chief put it, there is political pressure to stop doing this. It's in the news. There's going to be some ballot initiatives. Some state Supreme Courts, like Pennsylvania, have outlawed it themselves. Not federal courts, but state courts. So Chief Justice Roberts' point in the opinion is that we're not the only fix for everything. There are other remedies, and a lot of people are using those.
All right. Byron Henry, thanks as always, sir. Always great to talk to you. Have a great day. That is constitutional law expert Byron Henry joining us here on AM 950 KPRC.